from the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Talking Catholic, the official podcast of the Camden Diocese. This is your Talking Catholic co-host, Mary McCusker, and just like the past several podcasts, I'm joining from the comfort of my apartment since we are still under quarantine. And of course, I'm joined by Mike Walsh, the Director of Communications for the Diocese, who's joining us from his home. And I cannot believe I'm about to say this, Mike, but I'm actually starting to miss the vault. I have complained about the vault so many times on this podcast, but for our listeners, it's where we used to record these podcasts at the Pastoral Center. It's the tiniest room imaginable, no windows, no doors, and Mike recently painted it the worst shade of yellow imaginable, but I actually am starting to miss it.
Well, okay, so you got a couple things wrong there. There are no windows, but there is at least one door because you have to get into it. And that door happens to be a bank vault door, so you can't, I'm surprised you've forgotten that part. And it has that nice, like, loud...
The scariest door ever.
Yeah, when it closes shut, you hear that thud and then the twang of the iron bars coming across. I think what you really miss is human contact, because I was counting it up in my head the other day. Now, I have the benefit of live streaming all of the diocesan retreat stuff we put up on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter every night. But I think I'm at about 20 people. In the last 2 months, I think I've been in contact with about 20 people. Always,
that's
socially,
too much.
Socially distanced.
I'm at about 2.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Well, okay, that's true. But you have had the benefit of being able to stay in your apartment. I've had to be running around all of South Jersey, bringing the Catholic Church to the people via the internet. It's been the only thing I wish I had the godlike abilities to do that without leaving my home. But unfortunately, we actually have to cart all this camera equipment and John Kalitz and wires and more of John Kalitz to all these different locations. And
I do give you guys credit for all the virtual stuff you've been doing. It has been impressive.
Yeah, it's been
the retreats, everything.
I think it has done a good job of keeping me from going crazy, being able to get out a little bit. And I absolutely accept the fact that I'm blessed in the sense that because we're live streaming a lot of masses, I do actually get to be there in the room while the masses are going on. So I have been blessed in that regard when a lot of other people are being kept away, but it's just as painful. But the thing that's really impressed me with all this live stream stuff we're doing is how many people pray along and move along. Like, so when the masses go, at the sign of peace, everybody that's watching in real time is wishing everybody else that's watching peace by writing it into the comments. And, they're saying the amens and the responses at the right times. And I'm imagining in my head, they're kneeling and standing and sitting at all the right spots. And but it's a lot. Like, so we're averaging like 800 viewers across the last 7 weeks that we've been doing these. And it's stayed more consistent. What we found was that on our diocesan social media accounts, our YouTube account went from less than 100 subscribers to over 1,000. Our Facebook went from 3,500 to 5,200. And our Twitter accounts have always been hefty. So that's at like 2,500, I think, at this point. But we actually had to move on to Periscope to be able to send our videos directly to Twitter. So we went from 0 to 100 there. And our Instagram is almost at 1,000 now. So
wow, a nice humble brag there, Mike.
Well, it wasn't. Well, I mean, yes, I'm awesome. Don't get me wrong. But it has nothing to do with me, though. It has to do with everyone wants to see what the bishop's up to and all the content we're providing. I'm mostly behind the scenes. But what's impressed me about that is not so much that our numbers have grown for the sake of our numbers of growing. It's the fact that people right away have made that jump from in-person to the digital world in a way that I never anticipated. I would have thought it was going to be begrudgingly doing it. And from what I can tell, the people that have jumped on have done it like joyously. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants to be doing these things live stream. Everybody wants to be in person. Bishop wants to be in person.
Right.
Everybody we've had on the the live stream events have wanted to be in person, but it's tough. It's difficult. And even in these times, though, people are coming in to do all this stuff. I just love it. Oh, and by the way, we're going through the middle of a windstorm right now, and I just realized that all of the electric went out in the house. However, my laptop is battery powered, and my other thing is battery powered. But you know what's not battery powered? The internet connection. Okay, listeners, if you notice anything different in the sound quality, that's because we just had a little bit of a hiccup in our recording while I was going on and on about how great it's been, the move to virtual masses and Easter retreats have been in terms of the smoothness of it. My internet went out. So that's certainly something that, believe it or not, we have faced in all these live streams we've done. We've lost internet twice that required us to just keep things going, firing it up later, and then having a part 1 and a part 2 of some of the episodes of the Easter retreats we've done. So, dear listeners, I'm so happy that we could make you a part of this experience as well when sometimes the internet goes out. But I'm now using all my battery backpacks or backups, so we should be good for the rest of the broadcast.
And I don't like defending Mike, but in all fairness, as we record this, the wind is very, very strong. So...
Oh, yeah, it's understandable. It's a nasty day outside. Although this is usually one of my favorite kind of days. And it is surprisingly warm outside. So it tells me that, May will come and things will be better and warmer and sunnier at some point. So anyway.
Surprisingly optimistic of you, but I'll take it.
I'm trying to find it wherever I can nowadays. But Mary, this is not just about me and you today. We have a guest that I've wanted to have on the podcast for a very long time, and that you've been promising to get on the podcast for like a year, and just was never able to make it happen. So finally,
that's an exaggeration, but
not even close. We're having on the podcast today one of the true Renaissance men of the Camden Diocese, and I can't wait. I love it when he's in meetings. His smile brightens a room. I'm just so excited that he's part of the podcast today.
It's true. And he's actually my work neighbor. His office is just a few feet away from my workspace. So I do miss popping in, saying hello. All this buildup, though.
So who is with us, by the way?
We are welcoming James Reynolds. I call Jamie. I hope that's okay. And he is the executive director of the Diocesan Housing Services Corporation of the Diocese of Camden. That was a mouthful, but welcome, Jamie. Did I butcher your title at all?
No, that's all good. That's all good, and we'll call it DHSC to keep it short.
Acronyms are always easier.
Thank you for having me on. Now that I've turned 4 shades of red, Mike, I'm glad you're not recording the video aspect of this, and you're only doing the audio. But it's very nice to be with you today.
That's what's so nice. We've had one of your other suite mates on a few times, Mr. Kevin Hickey, and that's the nice thing of the difference between Jamie and Kevin Hickey being right next to each other is, Jamie is such a ray of sunshine, and Mr. Hickey is Mr. Hickey. But
no,
Jamie,
don't go bashing my other.
I'm not. Oh, here. Please! I was on a call with him earlier today, and I got whacked. It's okay. So Jamie, you are one of the, I wouldn't refer to it as a hidden gem, but it's definitely one of the gems of the diocese is the corporation, the housing corporation. But I'm not sure that it's actually gotten its just desserts in terms of how we promote it beyond the corporation itself. So I'm curious, can you tell our listeners what the housing corporation does? Sure.
So over the course of the last 40 years, the diocese has amassed a decent-sized portfolio of affordable housing throughout the diocese. So we're up to almost 800 units of mostly senior housing. And we operate buildings from Pennsauken and Cherry Hill all the way down to Cape May, with a stop in Pleasantville. We're continually looking to do new projects to expand the portfolio to serve, the diocese's low and moderate income residents. And so that is our basic mission. Again, most of our buildings are senior buildings. We do have one family site also, that has about 55 units. So it's a great honor to serve seniors in the diocese, and it's a particularly interesting and challenging time to do it right now.
Yeah, and how long have you been with the diocese now, Jamie?
It's pushing 4 years, if you can believe that.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe that.
So December will be 4 years.
Wow.
So about 3.5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So what does like an average day in the life of Jamie look like? I know now it's with the quarantine, it's probably a little more complicated, but
so it's interesting. I mean, I think prior to the quarantine and sort of COVID times, as we're calling them in our household, most of my time is spent. It's sort of split. One is sort of overseeing the operation of the portfolio, but we have a really strong property management and maintenance team, and so fortunately, I only get sucked in, when there are bigger problems or when there are larger financial decisions or budgeting decisions to be made. And so it's nice to be able to, work at kind of a, high level there. And then most of the rest of my time is spent trying to, pursue new projects and develop new facilities to expand our reach in the diocese. And then we also, we've also spent considerable time, or I also spend considerable time working on projects to, some of our properties are quite old. So figuring out ways to refinance those and get them, kind of refurbished and up to speed, up to more modern standards. So, for example, we just completed last year the renovation of Victorian Towers down in Cape May. That's a 204-unit senior building right in the heart of Cape May that was developed originally by the diocese back in the early 1970s. And it hadn't seen a real makeover in about 40 years. So we successfully figured out a way to refinance it and invested about $10 or $12 million in really upgrading all the public areas in the building, doing, rehabilitating some of the units that hadn't been touched in a long time. We reskinned the building, which is great because it was sort of early 70s McDonald's era architecture, yellow brick.
Sounds like the inside of the vault where we used to record.
Hey,
sure,
it's a style, right?
It's funny. When I was a kid, I used to go down to Cape May, and I would see this structure there all the time, and I never knew what it was. It's right on Washington Ave. If anybody's been to Cape May or you're not familiar with it, it's the main sort of walking thoroughfare of Cape May, and it empties into this intersection, and on the other side of the intersection is this giant building, probably one of the biggest buildings in Cape May, short of Congress Hall. And I believe you nailed it. This McDonald's era, 1970s McDonald's era look to it. But now, buildings in Cape May and that particularly in that area there's all this code and everything, so that it keeps this sort of Victorian look. It really does now look like an appropriate. I'm not saying it's Victorian necessarily in its look, but as close as you can get to Victorian while still being a senior housing area. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to make a 6-story building, feel Victorian, but we managed to, I think, scale down the imposing nature of it. And I'll give our architects a lot of credit for, coming up with a plan that, involved putting, lap siding on it and then breaking that up with some vertical elements. So it really is very attractive now. And I think, for most of Cape May and the public officials, for sure, everybody's pretty happy with how it turned out. Now it just has to withstand all these crazy windstorms.
Yes.
Well, it's been there 40 years.
Power there, Mike, that doesn't go out in the middle of a recording. Well, you know what? I've tried these units before at 2 of the different properties, and Jamie, I have to say they are beautiful. I mean, the presence that the staff have there. They're so welcoming. I had the chance to interview a few clients at one of the newer properties, and they always seem happy as can be. And they're I said to one of them, I wish I could move into one of these places. It's a perfect amount of space and just the building and inside. And it's such a nice, welcoming vibe that
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, our property managers and we also have social service coordinators in each of the buildings. They're just a remarkably caring bunch, first and foremost. And so the overall atmosphere in the buildings, really is a reflection of, kind of the care that they bring to the project. So we were fortunate when the diocese got out of the nursing home business. We actually picked up, I think 2 or 3 folks from the nursing home who came to work for us, and that was really great too, because they had a level of, I think, understanding of seniors that you don't necessarily get. And these were seasoned people who've been working 10, 15, 20 years, for the nursing homes. And so it was an easy transition for them. And we're the beneficiary of their expertise. So that's been great.
Oh, and I've seen you interact with the seniors and they love you. Their faces light up when you walk by.
I don't know about that. It's another company I worked for several years ago. They were they were purveyors of senior housing as well, and they had a new structure built not long after I joined this company. And the thought that actually goes into these buildings in terms of making them accessible, not only accessible as good living spaces for seniors, but really communal in nature, so that you have these opportunities to get together. They're in areas where it's fairly easy to get to, grocery stores or shopping of some kind without too much of a trek. And I really do think that goes a long way, particularly for seniors, in making it a comfortable environment for them to sort of exist in these years of their lives. What kind of thought goes into that as you're developing these sites or redeveloping these sites?
So on the design end, I think we really try to create spaces within the building where natural interaction can occur, which is sort of a bummer right now because we've got all these attractive spaces for people to meet and socialize in, and now they're being told wear masks and stand 6 feet apart and don't linger. But it's literally everything from in most of our buildings we do communal laundries on each floor rather than putting washers and dryers in the units, because that helps people, encourage them to get out of their units and just socialize with the people on their floor that they see. And then on each floor, we typically have some kind of community room. On the upper floors, they tend to be smaller. They look more like libraries or living rooms. Sometimes there'll be computer facilities in them, but they're all designed to just allow people to get out of their units. And if they don't, if they're feeling cooped up, they can go out and be in a public space, be in a comfortable chair, read, watch TV, play games, do puzzles, all that kind of stuff. And then, on the ground floor, we really try to invest in having attractive lobbies with real comfortable furniture. And then we always have a community room that we design in, a larger community room that can really almost accommodate, most of the residents in the building at a meeting or at an event. So that if they want to have a dinner or they want to have a resident meeting or they want to do an activity where 30 or 40 people want to come and participate, we have the space to do that. And typically there's kind of a modified kitchen, not a commercial kitchen, but some kind of kitchen attached to that. It'll have a fridge, some microwave, ovens, other warming facilities, just so that people can when they have resident organized or property organized group events, they can get together and warm food and have a place to stage a meal as well. Mm-hmm. And so all those features really are helpful. And then similarly on the outside of the building, We try to have attractive outdoor spaces so that during the spring, summer, and fall, our residents have the ability to spend time outside. And then we also, in this day and age, smoking is becoming less and less common. All of our buildings are smoke-free, but truth be told, you're going to have some subset of residents who smoke. So we try to, at most of our sites, have gazebos that we sort of park out a little bit away from the building, but at least give folks a sheltered place to smoke. And again, they congregate out there. We do our best efforts to bring in smoking cessation programs and other things like that to keep people or to discourage it. But reality is that sometimes you can't teach an old dog new trick, and folks are going to smoke. So
right.
So we want to make sure we give them a safe place to do it. And so all those different discrete areas of the building kind of we think over quite a bit as we're developing a building. To make sure that we give places for folks to congregate and socialize, and in a number of different kind of areas, both indoor and out.
See, Mike, doesn't this sound like a beautiful place to live? Don't you wish that you were old enough to move in?
Well, I'm getting close. They just said I'm like 30 years away, maybe. No, I've visited family in facilities like this or homes like this, and I've seen them built. And actually, that's exactly the thought that I had, was that, oh, wow, this is these are really like very cozy apartments, usually very well located, where everything nearby to them is easy to access. And there's a lot of folks who, as they're getting older, they really start to think about, where they want to, go to in their older years, where they'll still have a sense of community. And that sense of community is really, really important. On my wife's side of the family, her grandparents and great-grandparents really refused to avail themselves of the opportunity of moving into senior centers like these, and I really think it had a negative impact on them. They aged very quickly, and not even just their final years, like the last 10 years of their lives, even when they were still very active, were difficult because they just refused to move out of these larger homes that were difficult to have a lot of upkeep, and a lot of negative things occurred because of that.
Well, just the presence of stairs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the biggest challenge, I think, for people. I think, for folks who want to stay in the home that they raise their kids in, it's totally understandable. And so making that jump, I think, can be really psychologically difficult. But I think that, what you make up for in, losing that, home of 40 years, where you make up for it is all of a sudden, you have a built-in group of people who are easy to make friends with, easy to socialize with. And I think what a lot of seniors have trouble realizing is that if you stay in your home for, from the time you buy it until the time you die, you're going to have the distinct displeasure of, in the last 10 or 15 years of your life, seeing an awful lot of the friends who you socialized with, you'll see them move away or pass away or both. And that's the natural course of things. But at a certain point, you realize, oh my gosh, I don't know anyone in my neighborhood anymore, because the housing's turned over, it's cycled. And it's funny, I'm listening to myself talk here, and I'm really repeating my father's sort of mantra these days. He and my mom moved to a continuing care retirement community 6 or 7 years ago, and from a home that they had been in for 40 years. And the decision was made a little bit easier because my mom had Alzheimer's, and so they needed to be in a place where, there was like a ramp for her as she got, more and more disabled. And she passed away a little over a year ago. But my father is still there and lives in an independent living, wing of the facility, and loves the society of it, loves the fact that he's got people to hang out with, have meals with, and that he doesn't have a yard that he needs to take care of, or other things like that are burdening responsibilities. But by the same token, they have a huge resident garden, and whenever the spirit moves him to garden, he can be out there doing his thing, and he really enjoys it. And so he's often, to me and others, touting the benefits of at some juncture, making the jump to a more collective kind of living arrangement, if for no other reason than to get access to some of these kind of benefits.
It's funny to hear you say that. My grandfather passed away just over a year ago, but he had made 2 attempts at moving into senior housing. The first time he did it, I don't think the place was a good fit for him. And even though it was an enormously large residence that he was in, and a room that he had to himself, his wife had died, my grandmother had died a few years earlier, and he was like, you know what, I just don't feel like it's time here yet. I'm going to move back in, because he hadn't sold his house. He moved back into his house. A few years later, his health started to falter just a little bit. He was still very mobile, but he got to the point where he was finally worried that something might happen to me in the middle of the night, and it would be good if there was a button I could push and have somebody come in and give me a hand. But what was really the kicker for him was, now he passed at the age of 93. 5 years prior to that is when he moved into this facility. The kicker for him was when they found out that, yes, he could in fact park his Corvette in the parking lot. And once he heard that, he was like, oh, okay, I'll move in. That'll be fine. Because he drove that thing.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, it was the best thing. But that really is, but it's true. It's finding that balance of bringing something with you and realizing that that you're going into a place where you're going to be, all those experiences you loved in your youth, that, like you said before, Jamie, are kind of fleeting as we get older, particularly a lot older. But they can still be there, and you have this sense of community. It's, you were talking about the folks that work there and help the residents sort of interact and get comfortable and find services if they need services. That's another thing that you're not typically going to be able to find in your own home, that sort of immediate access to someone to give you a hand.
Yeah, and particularly for folks who are lower income, the great thing about our social service coordinators is that, there are lots of services that people are eligible for, but they're not terribly good at, figuring out how to access them. Mm-hmm. And so this just, reduces the amount of friction and the difficulty, and helps people get access to things that, they need. And whether that's, something as simple as meals, like Meals on Wheels, or, other kinds of regular nutrition support, to, more complex medical services. The great thing about the diocese is that between and being affiliated with and a part of the broader diocesan structure is that we have access to Catholic charities and the services that Catholic Charities provides. So for people with for veterans, there's tons of services available. People also experiencing mental health issues, people experiencing other kinds of problems. We can get access to assistance through Catholic Charities really easily. It's really just a matter of.
I love when that overlap happens. That always warms my heart.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then on top of that, because the diocese has Vitality Catholic Healthcare Services, we're able to then connect our residents with kind of like a guide, effectively. The wellness nurses that work for Vitality are just great help in shepherding people through the healthcare system, helping them navigate, various kinds of doctors, various kinds of services, and also helping them access services that they might not know they qualify for. And so New Jersey has a really robust set of services available to seniors as they start to decline. But when you're in that decline, what are the chances that you're going to advocate for yourself to do that? But if you're in a place where you have experienced people who understand how the system works, they can plug you right in and get you moving. And so Vitality is particularly good at that. And we use them all the time to help residents as they get a little bit more frail access services at home. And that helps those residents then age in place in a way that they probably couldn't have even 20 or 30 years ago, because now they can get access to home health aides, they can get access to, licensed practical nurses, they can get access to food supports, they can get access to help with housekeeping. And so, when you gather, and if you think about that, bringing those services in from outside is way, way cheaper than having a person go into an assisted living facility or go into a nursing home. And so this also really helps, relieve the burden kind of on the public, the public fisc, in the sense that, it costs, maybe 20% of to do that than what it costs for someone to stay in a nursing home or an assisted living facility. So there really are some good social benefits to all of us by having a rich service environment for seniors in these buildings.
It occurs to me that we talked a little bit about the size, the nature of the facilities themselves, the larger picture. But what are the rooms like? Is it single? Is it double? Is it?
So typically, the older. So there's been a change in, I would say, the federal government's outlook on how seniors should live, and what affordable housing should look like. So back in the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s, it was not atypical to have studio apartments and one-bedroom apartments being the primary kinds of apartments. And so there's still, plenty of room, but the trend now is, really one-bedroom apartments and then a smattering of twos. So because our portfolio was developed over the course of 40 years, you'll see, like in a place like Victorian Towers down in Cape May, think of the 204 apartments, I believe 124 are studios and 80 are one bedrooms. And then similarly at one of our properties in Cherry Hill that was developed in the early 80s, you have a similar mix of ones and studios. But in the buildings that have been developed in the last 15 or 20 years, all of those are pretty much one bedrooms. And our newest building has, I think it's, we just opened a new building in Pennsauken, and we have 68 units. We have 63 one bedrooms and 5 2-bedroom units. The 2-bedroom units are particularly useful for people who have live-in aides. And so we actually, when we were leasing up this new building, we set aside the 2-bedroom units, not for, couples, but rather for folks who were coming in who had a live-in aide, whether it be a family member or a third party who was living with them and helping them with their activities of daily living. And that worked out really well. All 5 of those units were used for that purpose. And so it's and a typical one bedroom is 700 to 800 square feet. So it's a good size unit, and bedrooms usually 12 by 12. Large kitchen that leads into a living dining area, and then with today's standards for handicapped accessibility for bathrooms. Modern bathrooms are really large. It's remarkable. I mean, you walk into the bathroom in our latest building and, you'd say, oh my gosh, this is bigger than my bathroom at home, especially if you have a house that was built in the early 1900s or the 1800s, late 1800s. You kind of chuckle and you're like, holy cow, I want this bathroom.
Jamie, you're so knowledgeable with everything that goes into housing and all of this, but I'm curious how you ended up in this role, because I know you are a lawyer. And by the way, Mike doesn't like lawyers. Ask him about his past experience working with lawyers. But
in my defense, it's not so much that I don't like lawyers. It's just that I don't want anybody to become a lawyer. It's a completely different perspective.
Mindful of who our guest is now.
Fair enough.
No, he's already a lawyer. He's already been tainted. I can't do anything about him now. But
exactly, he can't purify me at this point. I'm just stained. Anyway, so how did I come to this? So I worked out of college. I worked in housing and community development for 6 or 7 years in Camden. Actually, I ran a little credit union. Then I was involved in city government for a while. And after doing that for about 6 years, I decided, I needed to further my education. So I decided to go to law school. So I stayed local and went to Rutgers. And after Rutgers, I knew that I probably wanted to stay in the, housing community development field, but I had the opportunity to go work for a really big law firm in Philadelphia. And I thought, hey, I should at least check that box and do that. So I did that for a couple of years, knowing full well that it wasn't likely going to take, and it didn't. So I had good success. I enjoyed it.
Soul, I see.
but anyway, so then I decided I wanted to get back into doing housing and community development work, and I had the opportunity to go to work for the Housing Finance Agency for the state. Did that for a little bit, and then left there to start my own law firm with a friend of mine from law school. Again, thinking I'd focus on real estate and community development. And shortly after leaving there, I got approached by one of the largest developers in the Mid-Atlantic about becoming their general counsel, and it was a great opportunity. And so I took that, and, I did that for about 11 years. Oh. And so doing affordable housing, but from the private sector side. So, there's most affordable housing that gets developed in the country today is done through something called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. And it's very much a private sector driven kind of approach to developing housing, and it gets a lot of housing built. So yeah, I did that for about 11 years, and in the process, recognized, hey, I'd really like to get back to my nonprofit roots, and so left in 2016 and started doing, hugged my shingle back out again, started doing work for nonprofits with the idea that, ultimately I'd like to get back inside of a nonprofit, maybe run one. Little did I know that I got hired by the Housing Corporation to work on the refinancing of Victorian Towers back in early 2016. And a few months after, or middle of 2016, a few months after I started doing work on that particular project, the guy who was the executive director gave his notice and moved on to Catholic Charities USA to do some housing work down there. And, this led to that in talking with the board, and we decided it was a good fit. And so I took it on, and I've been here since December of 16. So that's the long, short story, or the short, long story of how I got here.
So do you feel like this, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead. Do
you feel like with this work, it kind of fills that mission-oriented side of what you love, but you can still use, the knowledge and expertise that, you've learned and built over the years? How's that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And to be honest with you, when you're most typical jobs where you're a lawyer, right, you're an advisor. you're not the principal, you're not the main actor. And so this, being an executive director or developing housing, gives me the opportunity to be much more the protagonist in my sort of job story, which I enjoy more, frankly. And it's fun to be an advisor, but for me, it's more fun and interesting to, be the person who's, charged with getting stuff done and making new projects happen. And so it kind of pushes a lot of buttons for me that, traditional lawyering didn't. So it's a very good fit. And of course, all the skills that I developed and work that I did leading up to this, seamlessly kind of add to my ability to get stuff done. So it's definitely been a very easy transition, from one side to the other. And I've been on a lot of nonprofit boards over the years. And so I've stayed very close to the nonprofit world. And so that also, that sort of avocational volunteer work that I've done has also, I think added to my, just to the skills and the experience that I bring to the table as well.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people who dip their feet into the nonprofit world somehow just keep ending back in it in some form or another. It's like once you kind of feel that, the mission part of things and you see the difference that you're making, it's probably hard to really leave it forever.
Yeah. And again, in some, for all the years that I was, working in the private sector, albeit, doing affordable housing, the affordable housing component of it scratched an itch. But, we were in it for the money, and kind of, I wanted to get back to doing it for the love. And so, during those years, most avocationally, I was really involved in a couple of different organizations at Camden. And that helped, kind of keep me close to the, kind of the mission end of things, albeit, they were kids organizations, not housing organizations, but still, that I never strayed too far from that. And so, it's nice to come back and get to do it, as my day job.
It's funny. A lot of people just picture lawyers as these dull, no offense.
You nailed it. Keep going. All right.
No. Now I sound mean, but, they're worried about not being able to find that kind of fulfillment that you found, but you're living proof that it is indeed possible to do both.
It's possible, but it's definitely, it takes some doing. There were inflection points in my career where, I looked at my wife and I said, all right, I'm going to leave this private sector law firm job.
You're going to say I'm going to leave you.
No. But honey, early in my career when I was working for the big law firm, and then I decided to go work for the state of New Jersey. I'm like, honey, I've got great news. I've got an exciting new job. I'm going to be making half the money that I was making, and she's been great. But again, it's hard to, you got to remember to organize your kind of financial life in such a way that when you get to those inflection points, you can make those decisions, without being trapped in a mortgage that's too big or, car payments, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So, I feel very fortunate to have a frugal wife, A, and B, have been able to make been in a position to make those decisions, when the opportunities came along, without having to worry too much about, gosh, are we going to go bankrupt in the process?
Mary, that's actually a very, cogent observation you made was the fact that, I as someone who did something similar to what Jamie did several years ago, I've worked in 3 nonprofits and I've worked in 4 for-profits, and the nonprofits have brought me the most joy. Sometimes the most frustrations as well, depending on what it was. But it was the most frustrations not because I was dealing with the things that I would have to deal with in a for-profit agency, but because I tended to care so much for the nonprofit stuff that I was doing that it would really anytime the diocese of the church or Catholic Charities is being attacked by outside forces, that's something that, and it's my job to be out there and get ahead of those things. It's, I take those things very personally. Right now in the Diocese of Camden, we announced recently that we closed 5 schools, and that was an incredibly difficult decision, one that was painful for everybody involved and that nobody wanted to do, but it was a decision that had to be made. And naturally, we've been attacked and vilified for making the decision. People seem to forget that those 5 schools are very important. We would love to keep them open, but there are 31 other schools or 32 other schools that we have to keep open as well. And sometimes very difficult decisions have to be made because of that. But I still wouldn't want to be anywhere else because I got to see just the pain and sadness on the part of the people that had to make those decisions, and realizing how traumatic that they knew it was going to be to the other people. The fact that it wasn't some unfeeling, from on high, in the distance, and these are people we know. These are people we've worked with for years. In this case, Hamilton and Wildwood and Collingswood, and it brings us great pain. And when I worked in the for-profit area, I did. I was a PR guy for law firms, and it was my job to write the articles on how to break strikes and how to break unions. And I can't say that I found that to be fulfilling to my Jesuit trained soul. So if I had to choose between the two, I'd rather go into battle working for nonprofits. And I actually recommend it if you are a person who has a heart and really wants to throw yourself into the things you believe. Feel free to take the pay cut and work in the nonprofit world. For one thing, if you have skill sets, you'll use all of them, and they will be maximized to their fullest, and you will learn twice as many more because there's just not a lot of people in the nonprofit world, and so we have to learn how to do many things, as you know. Correct, Ms. McCusker?
I was about to say, classic example, me being dragged on as a podcast co-host is not anything that was written in my potential job description, but here I am.
That's right. So I, if people are listening now and hearing, I always like to have this conversation because it means a lot to me because, it's the best decision I ever made, even though it was financially, you and I have talked about this a couple of times, Mary, offline, where I wouldn't go back in, it required no thought at all when this position came available, even though I knew I was going to be taking a pay cut because I knew I was going to be working on the side of the angels. And, there's something very fulfilling about that. Every time, any day, I've said this before on the podcast, anytime that I have a bad day, all I need to do is go over to Catholic Charities because I'll see all the great work that's being done there. And we'll see Jamie's smiling face as he runs out to a meeting somewhere. Because I've never actually seen him in his office. I've seen him leaving his office. I've never actually seen him in his office because he's always running to a meeting.
Well, Jamie's very tall, and so am I. I'm 5'11". Jamie, you're what, 6 something?
Yeah.
My point is, I can always see directly. He's one of the only people who I can make direct eye contact with across the building.
That's right. Well, because the field, the sea of cubicles is, is too tall for most people. But Mary and I, we just pop our heads up. Yo.
Yep. Which is a good thing, but a bad thing if you're trying to hide from somebody. But
That's
I'm
true.
never trying to hide from you, Jamie.
Oh. Well, thank God for that, Mary.
We talked a lot about Victorian Towers, and we mentioned a couple of the other towns that these are in. But what's the name of the most recent tower that was built, or most recent facility?
It's a 68 unit senior building in Pennsauken. It's called Stonegate at St. Stephen Phase 2. It's a mouthful, right? But we have Stonegate 1, and so it's on the same campus. So it's nice. It's the St. Stephen campus was already host to a 75-unit senior building that we've operated for about 13, 14 years. So we had the opportunity to redevelop another portion of that site. There's an old convent that had fallen into disuse, and there was a good-sized chunk of land around it. And so we were able to take that down and put up a really nice senior building. And Demand was really strong for it, so we're fully leased up. We've only been, we just opened in February, so it's, the units kind of flew off the shelf, and we're really lucky about that. So that's our latest one, and it's a really lovely building. We were very fortunate to be able to have some really nice amenities. We were able to even include like a solar array on the roof to help offset some of the electric costs. It's a pretty green building. The different financing programs for affordable housing now have some pretty strong, green building requirements, and so this building in particular will end up being what's called LEED certified, and there's multiple levels of LEED, but this should be LEED Gold, which is a pretty nice accomplishment, and should mean that the residents' utility bills are really, really low, because the building is really well insulated and really well sealed, and has very high efficiency systems all over. So.
And what's the process for inquiring about the availability of units in terms of
so we have a leasing operation that will field inquiries. Now you're really putting me on the spot now, because I have to remember what the number is.
Just keep talking; it'll come to you.
No. So the number for the building is 856-342-7155.
Well done.
And that would get you access to our managers, Dawn and Margie, and who are fantastic, and they can help provide additional information. We have two different types of units in the building, and now that we're full, we've got waiting lists. But what I tell anyone who's a senior who could potentially qualify for this kind of building is get on a waiting list, get on multiple waiting lists, because you may not need it now, but if the waiting list is 2-3 years long, 2-3 years from now, you may get that call and say, hey, your number's up. Are you ready to make the jump? And oftentimes that's given a senior enough time to sort of wrap their heads around, hey, it's time for me to downsize. Typically in Camden County, maximum income for a person in one of our buildings, because we're in one of these government programs, is anywhere from $30,000 to $38,000, $40,000, depending on the nature of the program and the building, the specific program at each building. But for a lot of seniors, that's right in the sweet spot, right? Because they're getting $1,500 a month, maybe from Social Security, and maybe they have a small pension from somewhere else, and they're maybe they're making $20,000, $22,000, $25,000 a year. That can be a really good fit for them. Some of our buildings also, a good number of our buildings have rent subsidies that come with them. So for anyone who's coming into that situation, you would only ever pay 30% of your income as rent. And that's a fantastic weight off of your shoulders, if you're a senior, especially if you're someone in your, say, early 60s, you're still working, and you're worried, gosh, is Social Security going to be enough for me if I stop working? Well, if you get into a building that, has this, a rent subsidy, what that does is it gives you the flexibility to decide to stop working, because if your income drops, your rent drops.
Yeah.
And that's a godsend, especially for people who work in, physical labor. Hang on for 1 second, folks. We've got some
in the background.
No, it's okay. It's like if there's one thing we've all gotten used to in Quarantineville, it's the fact that there'll always be the sound of a kid going by, a printer going off,
my dog barking,
your dog barking.
Thank you guys for covering me while I hit mute.
That's okay. We're almost at the end. We only have like 3 minutes left to go. So the boys are doing fine.
I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by my children that yeah, having that rent subsidy is a great thing because it really does give seniors flexibility to be able to, change their economic circumstances and not have housing disruption as a result of it. And so, I feel really good about being able to offer that to the vast majority of people who live in our buildings.
Yeah.
No. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Kyle. I just wanted to ask real quick, how's everybody doing with the virus situation right now?
Oh yeah, we haven't talked a ton about that. We've been really fortunate. We have not had any confirmed cases of folks who are in the buildings now. We have a couple of suspected cases where, somebody's done a telehealth appointment with their doctor, and they've said, "Oh, you may have it. You should quarantine."
Yeah.
And so we're very careful in those cases, and we've got some pretty strict protocols in place to protect our staff. But we have been blissfully or luckily pretty much free of the virus in all of our buildings so far. And early on, it was a real concern because at one site we had four residents who were traveling in Spain.
Oh, no.
And they got quarantined in Spain for 5 days in a hotel by the Spanish government. They were able to finally get a flight out. They'd get back here. And then, fortunately, a couple of them were able to go with family. But the one or two who came back to the building made it through their 14-day additional quarantine without getting sick. And so we were really, really very lucky. So
they're in the best of care and in the best hands with your staff. I know that much.
Yeah, so far so good. But again, it is. I think the scary thing is for all of us is wanting to keep staff safe, wanting to keep the other residents safe, and also wanting to continue to provide a level of services and help people combat the isolation that they're all feeling.
Yeah.
So we're calling every resident every week, checking in. Do you need anything? Do you want anything? And making arrangements to try to supplement their needs if there's a gap anywhere. But I have to say the residents themselves have been stepping up in really beautiful ways, and the amount of help that they're giving to each other is just an incredible inspiration. And the way they're checking in with each other and caring for each other, in addition to the care that they're getting from our staff, but the way that they're coming together as people and just, really being mindful and loving each other is pretty cool.
That's great.
And that's the motto of the Diocesan Housing Services Corporation. Love begins at home, by Mother Teresa. I think she said that. I've always loved
Mary, you're a good student of our website. I love you.
I sure am.
And for our listeners, I'll have the website address in our in the info about the episode today. Do you happen to recall what the name, what the URL address is for the?
It's very easy. It's just housing.camdendiocese.org.
Very easy. All right. Jamie, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Mary, thank you very much for setting this up. And to our listeners, thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next week.